Hi, everybody. We're going to look at cults and we're going to see how cults operate as a type of religion that follows personality. And the term cult of personality obviously fits neatly into this. And then I want to take you through kind of history of some cults, especially how prevalent cults are here in California. And I'm going to center our assignment on a group in California that I think is pretty fun. They're like a UFO cult, and they make these really strange videos that I want to share with you. And I think that we could concentrate on a lot of the negative aspect of cults very easily. And the lecture, I definitely is going to point in that direction. But for our assignment, I kind of want to see the artistic possibilities in a cult. And that's what we'll be looking at next. So starting with kind of defining what cults are. So a cult is generally a pejorative for a social group defined by unusual religious, spiritual, or philosophical beliefs and rituals. It's a common interest in a particular personality, object, or goal. And of course, when you think about it, that was why early that Christianity was defined as a cult, because Christianity was a form of Judaism that was following Jesus as its main progenitor, rather than simply the general Word of God itself. But I think that Christianity has become so large that I think the term cult isn't maybe applied to it as the way that maybe it once was. So cults also refer in Catholicism to a particular saint that emerged in the 3rd century, gaining momentum in the 4th and the 6th century. Bones of martyrs were believed to provide evidence of God's power at work. So we would see these in Catholic churches, we see these reliquaries, these ideas that certain people have a tight-knit relationship with Christ and God, and their bones have powers that can heal. The imperial cult of ancient Rome is another example. So emperor worship. During after the Republic of ancient Rome, you could worship any god you wanted in the Roman world, but you also had to worship the emperor as a god. And because of that, that was the reason when you hear about Christians being persecuted in the Colosseum and fed to lions and stuff like that, them, along with the Jewish people, they also refused that. That was profane to them. You did not worship the king. You didn't worship the emperor as a god. They were simply a man. But that idea of cult relating to the idea of following the will of a single personality, again, stands to reason why that still exists today. Sociologist Roy Wallace argued that a cult is characterized by an epistemological individualism, that the cult has no clear locus of final authority beyond the individual member, and that's certainly true of what we're studying today. And he describes cults as oriented towards the problems of individuals, loosely structured, tolerant, and non-exclusive, making few demands on its members. Without possessing a clear distinction between members and non-members, having a rapid turnover of membership, and being transient collectives with vague boundaries and fluctuating belief systems. In other words, what the beliefs are of your leader are becoming your beliefs as well. Different kinds of cults. There are a number of them. Some of them you might be familiar with, some of them you might not be as familiar with. So, destructive cults are generally referred to as members who have, through deliberate action, physically injured or killed members or of their group or other people. Totalitarian systems of governance and an emphasis on money making are characteristics of destructive cults. Destructive cultism is a sociopathic syndrome whose distinctive qualities include behavioral and personality changes, loss of personal identity, cessation of scholastic activities, estrangement from families, disinterest in society, and pronounced mental control and enslavement by cult leaders. I think all of those things are definitely things we find in the cults who follow people. Now, one of the more infamous destructive cults was the People's Cults, an American new religious organization between 1954 and 1978, founded in Indianapolis, Indiana by Reverend Jim Jones. The People's Temple spread a message that combined elements of Christianity with communist and socialist ideology and an emphasis on racial equality. Following a period of negative media publicity and reports of abuse at the People's Temple, Jones ordered the construction of the Jonestown commune in Guyana in 1974 and convinced or compelled many of his followers to live there with him. So in other words, he left the authority of the United States to go live out in the jungle, build his own world, his own compound. And because it was very difficult for people to leave because they were in a different country, he, of course, gained more power over them. In 1978, reports surfaced on human rights abuses and accusations that people were being held against their will. And U.S. Representative Leo Ryan led a delegation to the commune in November of that year to investigate these reports. While boarding a return flight, some of the former temple members who wished to leave, Ryan and 4 or others were murdered by gunmen from Jonestown, and it was all captured on camera, and that tape exists. It's really frightening. After he had killed the congressman, Jones then ordered a mass suicide where they drank poison Kool-Aid. So whenever you hear, don't drink the Kool-Aid, that is the reference. That is the original reference that it comes from, is the mass suicide at Jonestown. And he murder-suicide 909 commune members, 304 of them children. And again, all of them died by drinking Flavor Aid laced with cyanide. So this is probably the most famous example, and probably why most of us are a little bit wary and kind of scared of cults. Doomsday cults. So a doomsday cult is an expression to describe groups that believe in the apocalyptic, and believe that the coming of the Messiah, the end of the world, is the reason that they should follow this particular leader. In the 1950s, American social psychologist Leo Festinger and his colleagues observed members of a small UFO religion called the Seekers for several months. They recorded their conversations both prior and after a failed prophecy from their charismatic leader. We see that a lot, where these doomsday cults set up dates in which the world is going to end, and then they amass a lot of power in their following to do exactly what the leader says, to ascend and transcend this world. And then normally what always happens is the date passes, and then the cult leader has to come up with another date in which the world will end, and then explain why his original prophecy didn't happen. We are looking in the pictures on this slide at the Branch Davidians, an apocalyptic new religious movement founded in 1955. They regarded themselves as a continuation of the General Association of the Davidian Seventh-day Adventists, established by Victor Houtef in 1935. In 1981, a man named Vernon Howell, later known as David Koresh, came to New Mount Carmel and studied biblical prophecy. By the end of 1983, he gained a group of followers, and in 1987, Koresh's leadership, or followers in 1987. Koresh also then broke away from the group that he had joined, and then they built a compound in Waco, Texas, and they amassed arms. And there were rumors of David sexually abusing young people there, and also stockpiling arms and munitions. And they were laid under siege by the federal government. There was a 51-day standoff, and the standoff ultimately ends with the accidental or maybe intentional burning of the entire compound, killing most of the people in the fire. And there are a number of TV shows and movies that, of course, document all of this. Cults of personality. A cult of personality is a result of an effort to create a heroic image of a leader of a government, or, as we've seen, of cult members. And it's done by modern social engineering techniques, usually the state in a one-party state or a dominant party state. A cult of personality often accompanies the leader of totalitarian regimes or authoritarian countries, and can also be seen in some monarchies and theocracies or failed democracies as well. One underlying characteristic is the nature of the cult personalities to be the patriarch or the father figure. And the idea of the cult personalities coincide with Marxist movements like we see in China. And we see here the cult of personality around Chairman Mao, the leader of the Communist Party after World War II. And I think it's a pretty fascinating poster where we have a bodiless Chairman Mao, and he is glowing with light. He is transfiguring as all the people are standing around him. We see these same images in Russia with Stalin and other groups. This idea of a single mind, a single father, and they are taking care of you. They get you to believe that they are working in your best interests, and it is your job to do whatever it is they demand out of you. One of the things that I find interesting about cults of personality, in particular in North Korea, are the use of the spectacle. And the spectacle is one of the central notions in situationist theory developed by Guy Debord, which we looked at when we looked at the Society of the Spectacle when we were studying appropriation art. So the spectacle refers to the autocratic reign of the market economy, which had acceded to a irresponsible sovereignty and totality of new techniques of government which accompanies this reign. It exists in a more limited sense where spectacle means mass media. It's the most glaring manifestation of the spectacle in mass media. In the society of the spectacle, commodities rule the workers and consumers. And instead of being ruled by them in this way, individuals become passive subjects who contemplate the reified spectacle. And there are a couple examples, I think, of looking at spectacles that I would like to share with you. So Debord says the spectacle is not a collection of images, but a social relation among people, mediated by images. One of the more fascinating, I think, spectacles is in North Korea, the mass games at Arirang. These mass games include thousands of acrobats, thousands of school children holding cards that they are changing and creating images in the stands. And I think that they are amazing. Let me show you a little bit of what this looks like. Now, I'd be clear, it horrifies me as well in terms of the control that's going on to create this. So what are we seeing in these mass games? We're seeing that the control of the dictator is so powerful that all the people are moving in unison. And I think what you can imply out of this, or maybe what the games want us to imply, is that this is also how they would move militarily. So this is a little bit of what this looks like.
The following scene opens with the flag of the Down with Imperialism Union, created by President Kim Il-sung in 1926, being formed on the card screen. Tributes are paid to important figures of the revolution before performers form the word Juche in the center of the stadium. Other notable scenes include a performance depicting revolutionaries at the Paektusan secret camp, from where the revolution was directed, the return of President Kim Il-sung to Pyongyang in 1945, symbolized by the Arch of Triumph, and finally, with an image of the national flag and national emblem.
So think about how many resources are put into this for this show of the spectacle, right? This spectacle is, again, used to control the population and to send a message to the enemies, again, about how much control that there is within this regime. And again, there's something beautiful about it. There's something beautiful about the way that people are moving in unison. But when you think about the implied threats that perhaps are happening, there's something I think really kind of horrifying to the games as well. And I think we're going to stop there with that. Now, can we find the spectacle in other places? Well, I would say take a look after the Super Bowl at the spectacle of the confetti raining down, right? Like, again, this mass media spectacle that, again, shows this kind of power of this culture. And I think that there's something really fascinating about these giant spectacles in any country. Another examples of the spectacle I find in the balloon drop that we see at the Democratic Convention after they have decided who their presidential candidate is going to be.
Hugging each other, crying, and this was something.
So notice that the dropping of the balloons here, look at, again, the amount of money and effort and unified movements that are happening to make all of this go on. The spectacle is a way of showing power, and the spectacle, I think, is certainly something that probably is something that we could say is involved in cults of personality for sure, but definitely in other ways too, I think, as we're looking at the Super Bowl as well. UFO religions. So there are a number of religions around UFO. And UFOs really seem to be a phenomenon after the 1947 Roswell incident. We don't see any such thing until that incident happens. And there isn't really any evidence that there was a UFO. It was possibly a weather balloon or something else. But the Roswell incident had led then to more and more of this possibility or this speculation of extraterrestrials coming to Earth. And again, where are they coming from? I don't know. What do they want with us? And is it likely that in this vast universe that these people have traveled this far in these amazing ships and then are evading contact with us? Seems kind of unlikely to me. I think when we're looking at UFOs today, I am not a believer in them being extraterrestrials. I think there's a real possibility that there are other countries that may have technology that we don't have, and the idea that their technology could be more advanced than us might be so unbelievable to an American population that we have to turn it into something else, into UFOs. So cults around UFOs, probably the most famous one is Heaven's Gate. Heaven's Gate was led by Bonnie Nettles and especially Marshall Applewhite. They were known in the movement as T and Doe, and they are on a journey of spiritual discovery, identifying themselves as two witnesses of revelation, and they attract several hundred people in the 1970s. They take on a monastic lifestyle, and then it's a mixture of Christian millennialism, believing that the world will end in the year 2000, New Age, a range of spiritual or religious practice that grow in Western society in the early 70s, and its adherents typically see it as spiritual or unifying mind, body, and spirit. And again, that idea of mind and body, something we saw in Plato, and the idea of spirit and body, something that is talked about by Augustine in Catholic theology. And then we now see it today as this three. And think about the three that we also saw in witches in terms of the three witch spirits of the maiden and the mother and the crone as well. That idea of the magical number of three is something also that pops up a lot in religious conversations too. So the central belief of this group is that followers could transform themselves into immortal extraterrestrial beings by rejecting their human nature, and they would ascend to heaven, referred to as the next level or the evolutionary level above human. So the one leader, she dies of cancer in 1985, which challenges their views of their leaders having some secret to help them ascend. And then Marshall Applewhite, he comes up with this idea that the group could ascend on a comet that was coming near the Earth, and that their body was simply a container or a vehicle. On March 26, 1997, there was a mass suicide of the group, and it's a pretty famous image of the group committed suicide, and they were dressed in tracksuits with sneakers, and they all wear the same clothes, and they were trying to hitch a ride on the Hale-Bopp comet, and I don't think that there's any evidence that this worked at all. Another type of cult that is big business in Los Angeles is Scientology. Scientology is a type of religion that was started by L. Ron Hubbard, a fair to middling science fiction writer who was coming up with a form of self-help called Dianetics. And his Dianetics, he was ultimately, had taken his Dianetics, his self-help book, which wasn't meant to be monetized, and he was convinced that he should use that to make money and started the Church of Scientology. So the Church of Scientology, I'm sure you probably heard of. There are a number of celebrities involved in the Church of Scientology, and always various scandals about their use of control, their use of sexual control, mind control, and also making it very hard on anybody that wants to leave the group or anybody who says anything bad about the group. They basically, if you say something bad about them, they try to sue you out of existence. And then, of course, my favorite of these UFO cults are the Unarians. The Unarians, it is an acronym and believes in a interdimensional science of life based on fourth dimensional physics principles. Founded by Ernest Norman and his wife Ruth Norman, they, again, husband and wife, and Ruth is ultimately going to take control of the group when he dies. Ernest claims to have been a child prodigy, having read all of his father's books alongside his formal schooling. He claimed that as a child, he performed for family, neighbors, and teachers unexpected feats such as moving a heavy rabbit hutch using Archimedean principles and small logs, building radios, winning arguments with parents and teachers. He was a very smart person, according to himself, a scientist and aeronautical engineer, and that the idea of television was stolen from him. Claiming to possess psychic ability, he began his metaphysical career reading palms and also claimed to have told women of their loved ones' whereabouts, often deaths between 1942 and 1945 during World War II. They believe in the immortality of the soul and that all people have reincarnated many, many times. They also believe that the solar system was once inhabited by ancient interplanetary civilizations. The aliens are said to be, quote, human beings who have lived on Earth and other planets outside of the solar system. I think what's most interesting is their leader, Uriel. That is the name of Ruth Norman when she takes over the group. And they make these really fascinating videos. And we're going to kind of look at one of these videos, and we're going to do an assignment kind of around this really fascinating science fiction cult here. Californian cults. Why are there so many cults in California? And again, why do these cults attract people like Tom Cruise and John Travolta, who are Scientologists? The entertainment industry recruiting Scientology, Heaven's Gate. Jim Jones was out here in California. What is it about California that leads to people going into cults? And I suspect that there is just a kind of loose kind of be who you are attitude in California that in particular really comes out of the 1960s and the hippie movement and the kind of be whoever you want to be kind of sensibility of that. Of course, the most famous California cult is probably the Manson family. So a cult revolved around a criminal named Charles Manson. In the 1960s, he amassed a small group of followers, mostly women, that he manipulated, gave drugs to, and had them bring people to the cult and gain money in the cult through things like prostitution and selling drugs. In the late 60s, the Manson had a beef with some people that he thought had stolen his songs. He was an amateur musician, and he wanted revenge. And he convinced his followers to go and kill a couple of families. One of the families included Sharon Tate, a famous actress at the time, who was pregnant. And they were trying to create a movement called Helter Skelter, based on the Beatles song from the White Album. And Manson believed on LSD that Helter Skelter was telling him to start a race war. And during this race war, ultimately, the Manson family would buckle down and wait for the war to end. And then when it ended, they would lead this new world. Of course, the murder spree terrified California, was pretty much the signal of the end of the peace and love and hippie movement of the 70s, and leads us into the more violent and pessimistic 1970s. Manson ultimately will die in prison, and there are a lot of documentaries and also revisionist history when we look at Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, made by Quentin Tarantino, where he makes a film where his characters kill the Manson family before they can do their murders, and therefore the end of the 60s and the end of that old Hollywood generation in the Westerns never ends and continues. Our discussion. So, I want you to tell me what a cult is, what a cult of personality is. Why do you think people join a cult? Really try to get in depth with this. Really try to get yourself into the weeds in this. Don't, not just a sentence ad, not just cursory. Really go into it. Like, really kind of figure out what are the different possibilities that would lead someone to either be desperate or lonely or seeking something that a cult, and let's say not some other religion that might be more predominant, like Christianity or Islam or something like that, or Buddhism. Why do they go to a cult? I want you to read an article about Uriel from the Unarians space cult. And then I want you to watch a short film on the cult. It takes you into the temple. And then I want you to watch one of the films that they make. And I want to get your opinions on what you think of this science fiction cult and why you think people join the cult. And then also, are the Unarians just having fun playing other people from other time periods or other dimensions? Are their videos a way for them to kind of pursue acting in a way where, kind of like shamanism, where you become part animal, right? Is there something cathartic to playing and becoming a fictional character that allows parts of your personality that couldn't come out other way to come out within those actions? And I want you to take a look at one of their videos here, and we'll look at a couple of minutes of this. It's pretty wild stuff.
My fear toward you is only my guilt of facing my destructive past.
If you aboard our ship, you will meet more of we brothers, and each one will tell you how they individually conceive the infinite love from this being. She is presently aboard this ship, for she, in one of her infinite forms of expression, has stepped herself down to express in a physical body, so you and your people may relate to her more closely. We call her the Elder. However, in her true spiritual self, she is known by the Brothers of Light as the Prince of the Realm, Uriel.
Okay, from what we've just seen, you can't convince me that there's a better science fiction film in terms of their effects. And I love how earnest they are. They seem to really believe what they're doing here. And the videos, I think the videos are art. Like, the videos are trying to recruit people into the cult or whatever, but, there's no evidence of this cult, like, killing people or committing suicide or anything like that. It seems to me to be pretty harmless. And in a way, I kind of hate putting them in that pot of the cult where we look at Jim Jones and David Koresh and Charles Manson, because this to me has a different aspect to it. But maybe what's important to this is that it helps us to kind of redefine cult, not just in destructive terms, but also in creative terms here. And again, I want you to take a journey with this cult, see what they're about, see what their leader is about, and then, take a look at this video and give me your thoughts on it. I'm really curious what you would think about these things. I just kind of, I'm not giggling because I'm putting them down. I'm kind of impressed with, again, like, as you know, I'm an artist and a writer. And I wish I had the kind of creativity and ability to shift my belief systems into something like this, right? Like, in the same way, like, I wish I had the ability to see ghosts. There are just certain things that my mind just can't wrap around that other people can do. Other people have those beliefs, and I'm really fascinated by it. And maybe even a little bit jealous that I'm too uptight or whatever it is to engage in these beliefs. So That's it for our section on cults. I look forward to seeing how you think about these videos, and I will see you very soon. Bye, everyone.